All right. So, what is the role and expectations? Why be a part of a chapter coaches board? Um, so there's a lot of different benefits to, um, you know, not just interacting with the students, but like I personally, the big thing that I get out of it is just the interaction and the mentoring and being able to, sort of bring the next generation along and help, sort of, just as we talk about in throughout Pylam of passing that lamp of knowledge. And I really appreciate that myself. And that's a big part of, I think why a lot of our coaches get involved and stay involved. And some of the things that, that are that benefit from your being involved as a coach, Paul, you're invested in the development of our brothers, you're helping to strengthen our chapters, and it ensures the longevity of our charter. Obviously, just coming back on the Lehigh's campus, obviously that's a really big important part of wanting to get our alumni involved, is ensuring that the longevity continues on, and we don't fall back into the patterns that caused us to have this 25-year gap in our history. It also adds meaningful volunteer activity to your resume, which some people find beneficial, that maybe don't have a lot as they're getting started out of college, but as someone that's been in the professional world a little bit longer, it may not as necessarily be as big of a draw. And then also networking with other PyLam alumni. We have a huge group of chapter coaches, more than 120 across the country, that are coaches for big chapters, small chapters, public, private schools. It runs the whole gamut. And there's some pretty incredible people that are part of our coaching board across the country. So, Paul, the first thing that I've got here on the slide that, again, please pay attention to the road, be safe, is the structure of our current e-board, and the way that Pylam has that set up. And so there are 8 total different roles in addition to the recs that roll up to them. Of course, we still have all of the traditional names that you would be familiar with yourself. Rex, Archon, Marshal, Prolocutor, Keeper of the Exchequer, Scribe. All of those are still the same, but in an effort to make those words make sense to corporate America and people outside of Pylam, we've added VP of different areas. So the Archon has taken on some additional roles. It's not just the first vice president of the chapter, but now they're also in charge of education and development. And so they're the VP of education and development. So they're overseeing new member education, development of the chapter themselves. And then on down the line, each one of those has a different, VP title that basically encapsulates what their role meant. So we have the VP of Programming and Risk Management, which is a Marshal, VP of Recruitment, which is pretty self-explanatory, VP of Finance, again, KOE, VP of Communications, which is a Scribe, which is kind of expanded a little bit because in some chapters that are a little bit smaller, that also encapsulates alumni relations, as well as not just putting together a newsletter, but now also doing social media. And there's a bit more involved with that as technology has permeated our operations. Then we have the VP of Alumni Relations, which is a newer role that we've just recently added in addition to my role just starting. It's something that we've only had for a short period of time, as well as VP of Housing, which previously the Marshal would have been the only person managing the house, but we've found that some chapters, when they have a larger house, or they have a house similar to what we have at Lehigh, we have a individualized housing VP, so that they're managing all of those house operations, because it's significantly more involved than it would have been when some of us were undergraduates. And then all of those, of course, roll up to the Rex, the president. And then I've also got listed a number of what all the committees fall under each one of those. I won't go through all of them, but as well as the judicial board, which is chaired by the Archon, VP of Education, and as well as the um, Marshall and KOE are also standing board members on there. And then there's two additional ones that are elected by the chapter. So it's pretty similar. And any quick additional questions that you've got from that, Paul, as far as like changes to that we've done to that, maybe since you were an undergrad?
No, it's pretty straightforward. And I can see where they all kind of fit in. We had a house manager, which I guess would be somewhat equivalent to that, right? To the housing person.
Yeah, exactly. And just as I'm sure you guys probably saw, there's a lot to do with a larger house, and it makes sense to have somebody that is elected into that role that's working through those items so that the goals that they present are in line with what the rest of the chapter is interested in.
Very good.
So we'll jump into the roles and expectations, and you probably remember us referring to a chapter advisor, and maybe a little curious as to why the name change. But first, I wanted to see kind of like what your experience was between your contemporaries and your chapter advisor when you were an undergrad.
What was it? Did you say?
What sort of interactions did you guys have with your chapter advisor?
I mean, it was relatively little. We would keep in touch. I'm just remembering from when I was Rex. We'd talk a couple of times a year briefly. It really wasn't a very engaging relationship, I wouldn't say, but there was some contact.
Okay.
It was. I think we might have met maybe, I don't know, every month or so, possibly, if that much.
Okay.
We either met
So
or
was it
talked.
maybe like 10,000 foot view, like just kind of going over goals kind of thing, or?
I don't even remember really much. I think a lot of it was like the finances of the house and problems we were having with the school. I mean, you got to remember the time that we were dealing with there. It was more a matter of like crisis management type stuff and finances than it really was, growth and development kind of stuff. But
Certainly, and hopefully we've maybe not eliminated, but limited the number of crises that need to be addressed. I think we've got a pretty good group that's not a major concern for us.
yeah, it
Was
seemed like from speaking to the guys that it is a really great group of guys, and obviously a lot more than we had, in our house. And it seems like, especially the guys that are the leaders, they seem like some pretty solid kids. And I'm sure with this organization structure and all the support that you give them, they'll have a much better go of it than we did.
Yeah, and that's very true, and that's why we've seen such success with chapters that have really strong coaching boards. The more engaged they are, and the more uh, I guess the opposite they are of um, call me if you need me sort of coach, and they're more hands on
Yeah.
of like, hey, here's a game plan, here's some things that you can work through, and gives them a great opportunity to be able to develop, just like you were mentioning. Uh, so the main reason for the name change, just kind of briefly, is the structure of an advisor is somebody who's really more engaged and like helping to make decisions, as opposed to a coach, which is really what we want them to embody, similar to like a football coach or a lacrosse coach who's helping to set up a game plan and then handing it off to the students or the athletes in the coach's standpoint, to execute on that plan. And so it's really more of a, again, that development, similar to what you would find in corporate America, again, where you're looking at, hey, we're trying to make sure that we're developing you, and we're going to take you under our wing and give you some ideas, but then it's completely yours to run and operate. We also find that one of the aspects that really makes it critical for both the undergraduate, but as well as the coach, that it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and finding a proper interaction that helps ensure that they're mutually beneficial is really important. Making sure that it begins to thrive when there's more than just reporting on operations taking place. A majority of the time, the coaches are brothers, and likely with everybody that we have at Lehigh, they're all going to be brothers. And while there doesn't need to be like a formal sort of good and welfare during interactions, um, it does help build up that personal relationship to ultimately help the professional relationship. And mental well-being is an important aspect of any relationship, and young men in this country are struggling with mental health and mental well-being more and more, and the better we interact with them and get a sense of like what they have going on in their lives, and getting an idea of like, hey, maybe their significant other just broke up with them, or a loved one just passed away, and maybe they're not likely to be able to be truly engaged and have a good conversation that allows you to really dive in deep with what they have, what operations or what challenges they're facing within the chapter as far as the business side. And so the better the personal relationship is, the better off you're able to really get a good interaction with with the Rex or whichever officer it is that you work with. And I mention that because we do look to have a one-to-one coach versus officer. So if we end up having, the 8, 9 different roles, we want to make sure that we have the same number of coaches that are meeting with them one-on-one, so that each one of them is getting adequate attention, but then also that the coaches aren't getting burnt out. And that's where that mutually beneficial comes in too. Of we don't want you feeling like you're wasting your time, and the same thing for the students. We want to make sure that they're finding benefit with the interactions that we're having. One of the additional things that I've seen some coaches do that have just been fantastic. We've got the first one that comes to mind is Ron Jenkins over at Temple. He has been, really deliberate in working through the students' LinkedIn profiles, going through job interview questions, even just doing something like a proper handshake when they're introducing themselves to somebody new is something that isn't always a guaranteed thing that all of our brothers have learned. And so all of those small things help to really build up an opportunity for these young men to grow and mature and be better for having been part of PA Lambda. Pause for a quick second. Hey, Jen, thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Hey, yeah, sorry I'm late. Totally forgot about it.
Glad that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us. We were just kind of going over some roles and expectations, and I'll certainly be happy to go over any questions that you might have afterwards if there's something that comes up that you may have missed.
Okay.
So additionally, there are some the additional benefit is the institutional knowledge. And so there's no organization in the country that is going to change out their whole leadership structure or their whole leadership group every year, or at least not any that are going to be successful. And so if you think back to your time as an undergraduate, Jim, Paul, anything, did you Paul, you mentioned that you were Rex when you joined, or when you joined the e-board. Did you get a sense of like, I've got to figure out what I'm doing before I can even start doing my job?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, we just relied basically on the person who had it the prior year, and it was, that was a little bit of a mixed bag as to how much, knowledge you get from the person prior.
Very true. Very true. How about you, Jim?
Yeah, I don't even think ours was that good. I was house manager and steward, and it was just kind of like, here, make sure we have food and keep the house clean.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, and that's not uncommon. And so when we leave that relationship building, or that handoff of that institutional knowledge from one e-board to the next, it's just like playing a game of telephone. You might have a really strong e-board, and then the next one just slightly less strong, and then slightly less strong, and then you get 5, 10, 15 years down the line, and they're doing things completely differently than they did originally, and maybe not in a great way. And so the coaches being there to be part of that institutional knowledge, to make sure they go, oh, the last e-board tried this, or 2 e-boards ago tried this, and they didn't find that worked, and here's why. And then it gives them some additional info to work off of. Maybe they find something that the previous e-board didn't, and they can improve upon it and make it work. But maybe they save themselves some time and problems, and be able to just skip that step to go, a little further down the line. So it's a big part of, what our coaches, what makes our coaches super impactful for the students. So additionally, with those roles and expectations, regular contact is really important. Modeling those expectations that you have for them. So setting up regular meetings on a calendar, and then rescheduling, rather than just straight up canceling. Because let's say you're working with the scribe, and maybe they don't have a lot going on, so you're meeting every 2 weeks, and you completely miss one meeting, and then you get to the next one, and it has been a month since you've talked last. And so it makes it really easy for a lot of things to kind of slip through the cracks, deadlines, different things that they, either need to be aware of or should be working on. And so having that regular meet schedule set up with them in advance, so that they know, okay, this is what is, expected, and they know to show up, rather than trying to schedule it each week, which I can tell you from personal experience, never works out well. You're always trying to go, oh, well, I've got this. And if you just have something on the schedule, it makes it that much easier to get that up. So setting that expectation early with the undergraduate that you work with is so important. And then also just sharing with them how important it is to over communicate. They can say, oh, well, I didn't want to disappoint you, so I didn't want to tell you that I was, that I had this thing that came up that I needed to attend. Okay, well, you just didn't show up to the meeting then, so that doesn't really help me to know that you weren't going to be there, so that I wasted my time. And it gets frustrating from you, for you as a coach, and it can be frustrating that the student feels like they aren't being heard or something along those lines. So again, making sure that you're communicating with, telling them that this is what the communication should look like, and setting realistic goals of, like, if you text me, I'm going to be able to respond to you within 48 hours. And as a chapter coaches board, it's great to set that same expectation across the board for both alumni and undergraduates, so that everybody's got a good expectation of, how soon they can expect to hear back from their counterpart. I have, excuse me, I have a great letter that I can share with you guys, that our Florida State coaches board put together, but basically set up all of those sorts of expectations. So I'll certainly be glad to share those with you afterwards. I know Paul's driving, so it won't make a whole lot of help for him kind of talking through that. But basically, it goes through and introduces everybody, provides phone numbers, email addresses, and a little bit of information about each person, both undergraduate and alumni, and eliminates right off the bat the, oh, I didn't have that person's phone number, so I couldn't get in contact with them when they didn't answer my emails. Helps to eliminate those kinds of issues that that inevitably crop up when trying to set up meetings. So then setting those expectations for the student, going through the what we think are what we found are the best practices, either weekly to bi-weekly, depending on the role, depending on the time of year. Obviously, the prolocutor needs to be regularly working through recruitment activities, but they might need a little bit more hands-on work when when formal rush is going on, or during informal rush, that there's more activities going on that they need to be prepared for. And then speaking of being prepared, making sure that when the students are showing up to the meetings, that they what things should they be working on, not just giving them a report like they might to the chapter of saying, hey, here's where operations are. The KOE is going to say, oh, we've got 30% of our finances are collected, we need to have 60% in the next month in order to be able to make dues or whatever. That's not the expectation that they should have. It should be more of like, hey, this is a challenge that I'm finding, or what, I've got these 3 brothers that aren't paying dues on time. I've tried to work with them. I've tried to find a way to, get them to get that set up. How can I have a conversation with them? And working through those sorts of challenges is what the expectation should be for the student to show up and have those kinds of challenges and details that they want to work through, as well as celebrating wins. That's also a big part of that too. Making sure that the students working on action items. So, whenever I finish up a call with one of the regis, I finish up with, hey, here's the next steps that we're going to work on. Here's some things, some deadlines of what we're going to be working on, or, you need to talk with your scribe because the newsletter is due, and, please have them reach out to me if they can't make the deadline, and make sure that you're setting some explicit action items to work through. And working through the roles and responsibilities. And I'm going to see if I can slide this into, there we go. So I know Jim's going to be able to see this, and Paul, for your benefit, I'll kind of explain what we're looking at. So this is our resources page. It is just chock full of a ton of great information. It starts off with general resources, which are things like minimum standards for chapters, an annual calendar they can work through, the officer structure, the item that I had shown you earlier, Paul, or talked to you about before, the roles and responsibilities for each one of the officers, as well as the directors and coordinators. And so they don't have to figure out what their job entails. It's listed out here for them explicitly, as well as different resources for each one of the officers: the new member educator, the risk management, recruitment, finances, philanthropy, on and on. So there's a ton of great resources, and there's a great way for them to not have to reinvent the wheel, because the number of times that they just will sit and spin their wheels, not get anything accomplished because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. I direct all of the regis I work with all the time. Oh, did you check this? Oh, I don't know how to do that. Oh, did you check the resources page? And I just keep referring them back there, so that is their go-to for all information. That should be like their first stop. And then if they don't find it there, then talking with the coach. And if they don't find it there, then escalating to IHQ and on and on. So there's some great tools there. And as I mentioned, we've got the roles. And again, this just, without reading it line by line, it's going to have all the different roles and responsibilities for each one of the officers. We have the same thing for the directors and coordinator roles. So that way they've got a solid idea of what to expect. And really, when they're going through and giving their speeches about what they hope to accomplish, they should, follow these guidelines here. And I mentioned that regular contact. So making sure that they're prepared and update with goals. So when they start off with writing out the goals that they want to accomplish over their term, making sure that they're keeping those in front of them, and refer back to them often. Because if I've got a great example of a Rex who loves to do social media and wants to do all of the marketing and outreach for the chapter, but he spends an awful lot of time on that and doesn't end up spending time where he needs to of managing the scribe to do communications. And if he doesn't feel that the scribe is able to do those, maybe teaching them how to do those things, but knowing that he really needs to stay in his lane of, hey, I've got to make sure that we get our newsletter out both the first and second semester each year, and I need to make sure that I'm managing the scribe to get those things done, not doing his job for him. And again, talking about burnout before, one of those things that if we're not working through that with the officers, especially the Recs, it's very easy for them to get burned out trying to do everybody else's job and trying to bring everybody up on their back. So the coach, as far as those expectations, I talked a little bit about those regular meetings, so showing them that what accountability looks like, and talking that through with them. One of the first things that I encourage coaches to go through and talk with their officer initially, and start off the conversation, maybe not start the conversation, but early on in the conversation with them, is that some of the conversations that they're going to have might be uncomfortable. And it isn't a shot at them. It isn't a personal attack, but it's a, hey, here's some things that we need to work on, or hey, you missed the target on this. We need to reassess and reevaluate and reset. And it's modeling exactly, especially for the Rex, but all of the officers, what they should be doing for the rest of the general brotherhood in modeling that accountability piece. Jim, did either you or Paul, did either of you have situations that came up where holding your brothers accountable was a challenge in your roles?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, constantly.
Making sure the trash got taken out, kitchen's clean, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, the fun stuff.
Sure. And it can be a challenge to delegate sometimes, right?
Yeah, it's mostly, we did the old sign up back in the day, and it was just making sure people showed up and did what they were supposed to do when they were supposed to do it.
Sure, sure. And modeling that with the students as the coach, saying, hey, these are the things that I expect of you, and need you to follow through on those items. And explain to them, this is the same thing that I hope that you do with your brothers, is that you're holding them accountable when they don't follow through on things. And we've just seen loads of great success when those are the kinds of conversations that coaches are having, as opposed to, oh, just call me when you need something, or just call me when there's trouble. It's too late. We're behind the eight ball when we get to that point. Additionally, there are some additional meetings. So I've listed the meetings here. The CCB, so it's the chapter coaches board, which is all the alumni volunteers that are coaches. So they have some regular meetings. Typically, those look like maybe once a month. And the joint board meeting is the one between the coaches board and the e-board. And at the very least, you'd want to have those 3 times a year. One being the start of the start in the fall, one being either at the end of the fall, beginning of spring, and then again at the end of spring. All of those so that we're setting goals, reviewing goals, and then resetting new goals if we need to, and then reviewing those goals at the end of the semester or the end of the school year. And so there's certainly chapters. I work with Ohio State. They meet monthly as a joint board meeting between the coaches and the e-board. But the minimum that we found success with is those 3 meetings to follow up on those goals and to keep everybody apprised of where they're at.
I would say, I can say already, this group is going to benefit from monthly. And that's going to be part of Mason's comments to you in a little bit. He's going to tell you about the strengths of this group of students and their needs and their weaknesses, opportunities, if you want to make it sound nice. And one of them is going to be the need for coaching. But we'll get to that in a minute. Back to you, Chris.
Yep, and one of those things is that this is a group that they've never seen those interactions, and so that's going to be a big part of setting those expectations for them of, this is what it looks like to work with a coach, to have regular meetings, to work through challenges, and sharing successes together as well. So there's also some shared attendance that usually the CCBs will work through, and that's attending chapter meetings, exec board meetings, and rituals. And so the expectation is that there's somebody joining those. And if you're not necessarily local, that's okay. Joining things like chapter board and exec board meetings can certainly be done remotely. And Ian, correct me, does the chapter have an owl already?
They will. And they've used it already.
Yeah. Okay. So they're already familiar with it. So basically, I think we may have mentioned what an owl was. Some other meetings that we've had with some of the potential volunteers with Lehigh. But the owl is basically, it's a 360-degree camera that basically sits in the middle of the room and basically films everybody and puts it in a long bar on Zoom. It's a really great tool. And I really loved an example that Ian has given before, in that you have a Rex comes in and says, oh, I'm looking for ideas for a new recruitment event. Let's go around the room and come up with some ideas. And he goes to one of his off and says, oh, well, this is the one that I want to do, that I think we should do, and I think this is gonna be a really great idea. And then he goes, so what do you guys think? And then, the prolocutor goes, oh, well, I've been thinking about doing this idea, and I think this is really going to work, and here's why. And then the Rex goes, no, that's a dumb idea. Who else has an idea? And then everybody else is silent. And then the prologue sits back like this, crosses his arms, and just kind of like leans back, and clearly his body language is saying, well, I'm not engaged in this anymore. And those are the kinds of things that aren't going to make it into the minutes for the chapter meeting, but very realistic and important details to glean from the conversation to be able to say, oh, Rex, let's have a conversation about this, that there's a better way to present your idea. Maybe check around the room first, then maybe present your idea afterwards, if it even makes sense to present your idea. Maybe somebody else has the idea so that you can raise them up. So it's a great way to find coachable opportunities that you can't find from just reading through minutes. And so as the CCB works through attending each one of those events, chapter, exec board, and ritual. Ritual is really one of the just as important as the other ones, but do need to have somebody there in person for that. I just recently did a training. We haven't gotten to the point where we have like our official ritualist training and official sign off yet, but we're working towards that point. And I'm happy to work through with any alumni that even want to just know what the ritual entails now, but go through and train you guys and make sure that you feel comfortable with running the operation, so that the undergraduates see it from our side, because so far they've only just been initiated and not necessarily run one. But it gives us an opportunity to be able to make sure that it's run properly, but also just as importantly that there's no hazing going on, because that's one of the times that there's the most opportunity for hazing to take place. Any quick questions before I move on? Welcome to David. Appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry I was late. I'm at a client meeting and dinner ran late. Sorry.
That's okay. We're glad that you're here. And please, anyone, David, Jim, Paul, you're more than welcome to stop me at any time and ask any questions as I'm going through too. So please don't hesitate to interrupt. So this is just a quick one, and I know Paul's driving, so I'll make sure that I kind of explain what this document is. Basically, as we're going into setting up the chapter for success, these are the monthly questions that the staff at IHQ, and really I got to throw to Brian Moore, put together for our staff. We found that we weren't having the same conversations or asking the same questions at the same time. And so we would get the answers that we were looking for, or find the details out about registering for the Leadership Institute, or paying dues, but we weren't necessarily all having them at the same time, and it would kind of throw off our schedule of things. And so we use this as a tool to be able to, in January we're going to talk about, well, when is recruitment expected to begin and end, so that we know that we're having the right conversations at the right time of year, and then make sure that those are brought to the chapter president's attention, and that we're all in the same boat, or we're on the same page as we're going through the semesters. This is something that I include in my newsletter that I send out to chapter coaches every month, and it's just kind of an ongoing section that I include in there. There's nothing that you need to do as far as sending information to us about these, but it gives you a good guideline to work through of, hey, these are things that the IHQ is going to be curious about or want to know about, and it gives you a guide of things to work on. As far as setting up the chapter for success, I mentioned a little bit earlier about goals. Setting up those SMART goals is so important. I'm sure you've all heard the term SMART goals before, but those are going to be the goals that are specific, measurable, agreeable, relevant, realistic, and time-bound. And setting the goals like this and giving these sort of specific instructions to the officers to set up those goals, to make sure that they're working through, that they have more of a CEO kind of top-down approach, that they're not siloed in their, I want to, the provocateur says, I want to recruit 10 people. Well, okay, well, that's great. That might be a good number, but maybe the Rex wants to see the chapter grow more than that. Or the Prolock isn't thinking about the fact that, oh, we have 5 seniors that are graduating, and if we want to grow by 10, we really need to recruit 15. And he also needs to work with the scribe. And you see how they're all interconnected. And so making sure that they're working off of each other's goals, that ideally the Rex sets his goals up first, provides those to the officers, that they support his goals through their office. And creating those goals should be a team effort. So, again, the Rex is going to set the wheels in motion as far as where the chapter is headed, but each one of them has to, be the expert in their area and work on those together. So again, that's why a great time to use those joint board meetings is a great time to be able to have these conversations and work through that goal setting practice with them. And as I mentioned before, the more specific these goals are, the more it helps each one of them to not only stay on task, but stay in their lane of, oh, you know what, I'd love to get to that. And that might be something that falls to me, but these are the things that I said are my goal. And I really got to get these accomplished first before I take on any additional items that might fall to my responsibility. So using those resources effectively, I know I shared the resources page before. Certainly a big part of the, not having to reinvent the wheel all the time. We also have the chapter minimum standards in here, which those are going to basically be the expectation for each chapter, that's based not only on, what our expectations are, but like their specific university or school, and that, we know that, Lehigh is not likely to get to the size of Florida State and Ohio State chapter size of like 150 guys, but they should be close to the average size on campus and have a minimum, either the average or the minimum of 20 members, and whichever is greater. And so we have these kind of tailored in a way to make sure that they're working through, expectations across the board, regardless of the size of school and university that they're at. We also have a coach's manual that is very thorough. It's got a lot of detail in there. And we're constantly looking to add some things to this. Part of my newsletter that goes out to the coaches is I take things from here and expand upon them, or share some anecdotes that kind of are featured in the manual itself. It goes through SWOT analysis, goal setting. It has a lot of videos that you can use and go through to help reinforce the information that we've included in there. We also have another document as well that I've started using a little bit more in some of my interactions. Very often, when IHQ comes in and is working with the students, they feel like we're coming in trying to take over their chapter, or we're trying to tell them how to run the chapter, or how to, taking things away from them that they want to be able to be the decision maker on. And I think this document does a great job. So there's our roles and responsibilities of stakeholders, and it basically goes through what are things that are kind of non-negotiables for from IHQ and the International Executive Council. And we've got a list of 13 things that are on there. And then we've got, what falls to the undergraduates in the chapter to be able to be responsible for. And we've got 28 items that are on that list. And then what are things that the coaches board are the ones that are setting the guide for. And, we've got another 7 items that are on there. And so it's to show them that, like, yeah, you need to do ritual the correct way. You need to use our officer structure, and you need to pay dues and all those kinds of things so we can ensure them. Excuse me. But there's a list of 28 things that are completely within their control. And it is to not only showcase that they have a lot of control and autonomy to run their chapter, but to show that we're not trying to come in and manage everything that they have going on. Just a small list of things from an IHQ standpoint and from a chapter coach standpoint. I really like that document a lot. But I'll be happy to share all of this with you because I know it's probably a little small and I know Paul's driving. So this will be some great details to be able to share as you get a chance to take a look at it. And then I listed on here meetings with Chris. I am happy to meet with any of our coaches, any of the VPARs, any of the scribes, because those are all roles that roll up to into my expertise. But I have a what we call you can book me link. Everybody on staff uses this as well. I absolutely love this. If you don't use something like this already, I highly encourage you to. But it gives you the opportunity to say, oh, well, what day, what times does Chris have available on the 23rd? Well, I'm pretty open on the 23rd right now. Most of my day is open, and they've got the ability to be able to book the time. It puts in a Zoom link, gives them a calendar invite, puts everything already in there. So if they need to do a one-off meeting that maybe they didn't, wasn't already pre-scheduled for the semester, they got the ability to set something like that up. And I share that for a great best practice, but also that you're welcome to utilize that as well and to set up meetings with me if you'd like to talk one-on-one. We'll work through different items that, challenges that you're faced with the chapter. I'm going to pause for a quick second, see if there's any questions or any additional information that I can provide. All right. Well, I know that Mason is going to share a few things, so I'll just kind of share what the next steps are in training. So we have ongoing coach trainings and discussions offered throughout the year. Sometimes those are in person when we're in town. Sometimes they're going to be a situation where, I'll set up a Zoom for a number of different chapters or a specific chapter like I am with Lehigh tonight. There is a coach training in the PA Lambda Phi University, which is the PLPU there. And it's a pretty quick session that you can go through. Kind of gives you an idea of current trends with working with today's student and kind of what that entails. Setting some good expectations, talking about liability, insurance, all those kinds of things. I do send out, as I mentioned before, bi-monthly chapter coach newsletters. Has a lot of different info in there, anecdotes, different things that I found to be helpful and encouraging for coaches. Review the coaches manual, as I shared before, but happily send the link to that. And then connecting with your CCB. So as you guys get together and figure out who's working with each officer. And I know that's something that Mason will likely touch on as well, as far as the needs of what the students have going on. That's just kind of reviewing that of kind of what we talked about there, those rules and expectations. And I know a couple of you missed some of those initial rules and expectations. I'm happy to share those with you. If you stick around at the end for a little bit, happy to dive into those a little bit with you. Ultimately, during the school year, the average time of the expectation for a coach is about 5 hours a month, which is not a lot of time. Given the huge task that mentoring can be, that's not a ton of time, a little more than once a week, as far as the expectation is to an hour a week. I'm sorry, and so that gives you an idea. During the school year, 5 hours a month is not a huge ask of time. Again, utilizing those resources both as a coach and as undergraduates. And then, if you have questions and you need some additional guidance, whether it's in the moment or working with a student one-on-one, happy to join into those conversations as well. So I'll open up for any questions, and then I know Ian probably has a little bit to share, and then as does Mason.
Any burning questions yet? Thanks, Chris. So here's what we're going to do next. In a moment, Mason is going to tell you a little about this group of students. I know you get to meet them. Some of you met them a couple weeks ago. There's 46 of them. So there's some really great things about them. And like anybody, there are some major challenges that they're going to have, like any group. And so we want you to be aware of that and what coaching will look like for them. Then when he's done, which will just be a quick overview, I'm going to talk about, okay, what are the immediate next steps here? And what's the timeline of things that are happening? Because although normally we're off in the summer, we actually need to start getting moving in like June. So we're going to talk about that. But Mason, first, give us just a quick overview of some of the strengths and opportunities of this group of students?
So yeah, like Ian was saying, I know some of you guys got to meet the undergraduate chapter, and they are a great group. You know, they're very energetic, they're very driven. You know, they're doing this for all the right reasons. Um, they're very coachable, and I think they have a very high potential. But with that, you know, they're a young chapter. We're sophomores and under, and none of them have been in a fraternity before, and they're gonna need help. Me and Hunter have been up here this semester. You know, we've been training with the e-board and stuff like that, but they're gonna need extra help, and I think they're gonna have some growing pains and face problems that we might not have been able to prepare for or prepare them for. So I think monthly meetings like Ian was talking about is going to be huge. Um, and also, I am a recent graduate myself. I graduated in December, so I can kind of relate to them. Hearing something from your own alumni base rather than HQ will go an extra mile sometimes. Like, as much as Ian, Chris, Brian, all of them knew what they were talking about, when I was a stupid undergrad, I was like, these guys don't know Western Carolina. They don't know what they're talking about. But alumni would tell me the same thing, and I'd be like, you know what? They got a point. And also, it just helps. So they're going to need some help just getting through this first little bit. But I think you guys have an excellent group of men that's easily coachable and has a want to do the best that they can and is willing to listen to so many different perspectives to get to that point. But I think
Thanks,
that's
Jason.
a quick overview.
Let me add on that. In addition to like them being nice guys, they're social, they are motivated, they do well academically. Each of them has said they didn't want to deal with the dumb stuff that they see on the Hill. So some of the hazing things that they're seeing and some of the alcohol overindulgence they don't want. So they're saying that these are all good things. It's also good they filled the house. We are at capacity and technically over. So that's a really good thing for their ability to develop bonds immediately this coming fall. Building on what Mason said about them being green. Yeah, 46 guys, 36 freshmen, 10 sophomores. They don't know shit. And I'm being funny about this. Like they think they do, they don't. Now, they've already made some mistakes, nothing catastrophic, but like making decisions on their own and not consulting our staff and then realizing, oh, we don't know what we're doing and almost getting themselves in minor little issues. So we keep resetting things and being like, look, you are the players here. Like if we're going to use sports analogies, but we are the coaches. And what that means is you've got to work within parameters here. Now they're learning a little bit from that, but they're also navigating through this whole what do we get to decide versus what's decided for us, which goes back to Chris's document about stakeholders and saying, look, the vast majority of things that you get determined, you pick students, but you don't get to pick everything, or we're not going to last more than a couple of years. And Dave, I know you've seen this because you spent time around Lehigh recently with your son. There are groups that came on and then were gone within a couple of years. We don't want to repeat that. But if we don't engage them, I promise you, because that campus is full of peer pressure. It's not their fault. The campus is full of peer pressure. And so they're going to be, oh, we got to be like everybody else. And that can get them in trouble because they're not, they're not that slick. So we're going to have to work with that. But again, they are genuinely nice guys. Let's talk about some next steps here quickly. We need 8 coaches. That's what fills the board and matches 1-to-1 with our students. It goes officer to officer. So if you had an experience as the archon or as the president or whatever, that might be a natural fit. Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be. If you know leadership, then you're going to be good with any officer. So that's fine. So we need to get 8, and we need to get this in place by the beginning of June. So we've got about a month. We've had 5 people sit through one of these one-on-ones. You 3, and then 2 a week ago. There are others that have raised their hand. Some people couldn't be here tonight. Something came up. Some people might have forgot about it. But we're kind of like, we need people to step up. Thank you to you guys. But we need to get this in place by June. We give the students off in May for finals, get back to school or get back to home, get your summer job, whatever. But June, early June is our National Leadership Institute. So when they come out of that, they're all fired up. So we want you to start working with them. I'd like to do a joint board meeting with them to start meeting some of them. Some of you might be virtual with them, but we want to get that going, because if we don't, they will do stuff over the summer, and then you'll try to engage in August and it'll be too late. And they'll be like, we've already done stuff. And then it's going to be frustrating. So we do need to do that relatively quickly. Chris will follow up with you and the others via email with a summary of what we talked about, the recording of this call, and he'll say, okay, here are the positions. What do you think? You guys can talk amongst yourselves. That's fine. Eventually, we'll also have a chairman of the CCB, of the Type of Coaches Board. That person would go with the Rex, but he's also literally chairing the CCB. So that's kind of where we're going. Again, any question will be welcome now, or if you think of a question tomorrow, just email us, no problem whatsoever. The only other thing I want to say to you, opportunity-wise, I mentioned this in my email the other day. We have, again, our Leadership Institute in early June. It's June 4th through 8th in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. At least 2 of our students from Lehigh will be there, along with 60 some other PA from all across the country. We are looking for alumni who want to volunteer as group facilitators for that time frame. It is 4 days, June 4th, finishing on June 8th. So it's a hard ask, I know. But if you're in a position to be there, it would be really helpful for you as a potential coach. If you're like, I just can't be there all 4 days, but I'd like to come, that's okay too. You could come and be an observer and get a sense of like what's going on. But that will really also help bring you up to speed with like, what is it like in 2024? Because it is different, right? It's different than what it was when you were there. It's different than what it was like when Chris and I were there. So that's something to think about. I think, Jim, you might be asking a question, but you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm being an idiot. Where in Pennsylvania was that again?
Honesdale. It's like hour and a half north of Bethlehem.
Okay. I say I've heard of it. I'm trying to picture where it is. Okay. All right.
Middle of nowhere, no cell phone
I was
reception.
just say, yeah, an hour and a half north of Bethlehem is like, yeah, my sister lives up that way.
It forces the students to talk. They're like, my phone doesn't work. What do I do? Like talk to your neighbor. It's fantastic. So yeah, we'll send out details about that in that follow-up email you're gonna get tomorrow from Chris. But it's a great experience. It's a lot of fun. You know, they're learning leadership. It's in big group sessions, and then they talk about it in small groups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then they talk about it in small groups, and then they go out in the field and they're climbing obstacle courses and they're doing zip lines and paddle boat races. It's a lot of fun. So that's all coming up. I know we've covered a lot here in an hour. I have to step off for another PyLam call I've got in 2 minutes. But Chris, I'm going to turn it back over to you to take any other questions and finish things out.
Any interest in me sharing that the most recent video that we had there, Ian?
It's 1 minute. Yeah, if you can share it.
Yeah.
Share it. It's fun.
Sure. Yeah, I'll share this with everybody here. We've got a video that we put together of the just basically what it's going to look like of going through the Leadership Institute, and I hope that it'll share my audio as well as I play. So let me know if you hear the music right away here. Oops, didn't play. Try it again. There we go.
No audio.
No audio. Okay, hold on.
And it's good audio. I gotta give Chris credit. He made this.
Oh gosh. Let's see, advanced sharing. Should share my audio as well. It's not, there's share sound. Okay, try it again. You now? All right.
There you go.
Yep.
Are we going? Ready! Onward, soldiers!
Hopefully that gets you all pumped up and interested in coming out to join the Leadership Institute. It really is a lot of fun, and something's going on playing there. Hold on. So it really is a lot of fun. It's a great opportunity to connect with the students. I still stay in contact with my small group that I worked with my first year. It was a great group. We actually split them up so they're not typically with their counterparts. So you don't have the two Ohio State reps or the two Lehigh reps together, which helps kind of force them out of their comfort zone. They don't have their cell phones available to them, as Ian mentioned. But love to have anybody that would be able to join. It really is a great time up there. Hopefully this year we don't have Canadian wildfires. That was a little bit of a kind of impactful last year. It was quite orange a couple of days. But other than that, it was a great time. We had a lot of fun. I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. Any other questions? Anything that maybe you got some concerns about, or maybe that you want a little bit more clarification on, that I can address for you. And then otherwise, I'm happy to go back and review some of the expectations with anyone that might have missed the beginning of the call.
It's quite different from when we were in school, but all looks good. What do you think, Dave?
I agree. Yeah, I don't remember any of this. It all would have been helpful.
I did go to a national meeting in Miami one year. EJ and I went. That was, but no, you made quite an improvement since then.
It's fun. It gives some good direction, and I think that I know that I did personally I did experience a lot of this, but I didn't get to experience the other side of like running the business and a lot of the fun side because I was restarting my chapter because of some poor decisions that some of my brothers had made. We had to restart, and I had some hands-on experience with my chapter alumni because headquarters tough time in the early 2000s. So the alumni from the 90s that I worked with were absolutely invaluable. That we could not have done what we did without them. We were 4 guys, and within 3 years we had 75 guys. Started winning George Beck awards, the chapter of the year award for PA Lambda. So we had I can tell you from personal experience the hands-on approach that this guide and this structure presents really makes a big impact as an undergraduate. I know personally my senior year I matured more working with those men that came in and helped guide me through the restart. I matured more in that last year than I did the entire previous 3 years of my college experience combined. And I hope that that's the similar kind of experience that you guys have mentoring these guys as well as that they experience as an undergraduate. As Ian mentioned, next steps, I will share some links with you guys. I'll share the how to get into the PLPU training session, as well as this slide deck and the recording of this video. I'll stick around here for a little bit, but that's all for right now. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And I will be sharing some additional information with you so that you have those next steps there in front of you.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Take care, guys.
Everybody.
Yeah,
Chris,
thanks.
I'll stick around because I missed the beginning of it. If you want to fill
Absolutely.
me in on what I missed, happy to do it.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
missed the first couple minutes too, so I'll catch up.
Yeah. Let me jump back here in my slide deck real quick. And I can kind of give you a quick crash course over here. All right, so you should all be seeing my slide deck there now, right?
Yep.
Okay. So as far as the expectations are concerned, so here's where I'll start. So you're going to be going through you're investing in the chapter development, investing in the development of the individual students, as I was just talking about my personal experience. It's the reason that I stay involved because I encourage our alumni, no matter where they're coming from or what capacity they have, to be able to work with our undergraduates to be the alumnus that you needed as an undergraduate. And that made such an impact on me. And that's kind of my mantra as the director of alumni relations for PA Lambda, that whatever that might mean to you of being that alumnus that you needed as an undergraduate, whether it's donating your time, donating funds, donating expertise, all of those things make a big difference on the impact of these young men. Often they don't have a father figure in their life that, not often, but they often can not have a father figure in their life or a strong male model, a role model to follow. And my goal is that some of our coaches kind of become that in some of these men's lives if they need that. And that's where that investment in their development comes in. Strengthening our chapters, we found that strong CCBs really help to make strong chapters. Some of the strongest chapters, not necessarily just because it's I probably throw to Ohio State a lot, only because they're my biggest chapter, and as far as our coaches are concerned, they're very, very strong. But they don't have a ton of alumni because their chapter's only been around since 2016, 2017. And so they don't have a ton of alumni. They've got some guys that are in like their late 80s at this point, from the original iteration of the chapter. But they have guys from, they got one guy from Florida State. They've got two guys from UF. They've got two Ohio State alumni. And so they've got kind of a mishmash of a lot of different chapters, but they work together well. They really take an active interest in the undergraduates and what they have going on, not just in the business side and the PyLam side of it, but also their personal lives. And that's really kind of a big part of the engagement and what we hope to accomplish being the coaches. It ensures the longevity of the chapter. Perfect example with Lehigh being that the chapters just got their charter back now, being just now back on campus. That's a huge part of why we want to make sure we get a strong coaches board up and running. For some, adding that volunteer activity to a resume is helpful, and networking with other PyLam alumni. We've got over 120 coaches across the country, from public schools, private schools, research institutions, MIT, Berkeley, Florida State, Ohio State, Christopher Newport, Roanoke, big schools, small schools. It runs the whole gamut, and it's just awesome to work. I get excited working with our coaches, and it's a great bunch of guys, men and women. We do have a few women coaches that step up and take this opportunity to mentor our brothers. So the structure might look a little bit different. So I know there's a lot here. There's a lot of colors. But the main things to look at here is, the Rex is still going to be the president. And then we have those 7 roles that are underneath them. So you're going to see a lot of the names here that you may recognize before. You're going to see the Archon, Marshal, Prolocutor, Keeper of the Exchequer, Scribe. We've added these VP of titles to all of these because if you say, oh, well, I was the Rex of my chapter, or, oh, I was the KOE, well, it doesn't mean anything to anybody outside of PyLam. So as these young men go on to be able to put on their resumes, it makes way more sense to, especially corporate America, to say, I was the vice president of, programming and risk management. And somebody that's not Greek, and especially that's not PyLam, it makes sense to them. So this is kind of a breakdown of how our current role structure is. We have recently added these last 2 down here, just as my role has been created over the last 18 months. Or I'm sorry, was created 18 months ago. The VP of Alumni Relations just slightly preceded me because we had a focus of better engagement with our alumni a couple of years ago. And then as well as having a VP of housing. And it sounds like you all may have had a housing officer or housing director.
House manager. That was lumpy.
Yeah, Chris already heard.
Yep. So
make sure there's toilet paper.
Right.
And the washer had to work.
Right. You want it may not get used a lot, but you want to make sure at least it does work if they are going to wash it, right?
Yeah.
So we've added that on because we found that some of the things that fall under the Marshal, takes time away from that, and not focusing enough on the house can be to our detriment with some of our chapters. So that's one that we've added, and we ask that the chapters keep this setup to how their officers are, because then if nothing else, it creates a common language for us. So if I talk about the Archon being the VP of Education and Development, that's the same to Lehigh, to MIT, to Christopher Newport. It's the same for everybody. And if chapters, keep using the old model of Archon, or they use something completely different, like they use Pledge Educator or something like that, it's not going to be an apples to apples discussion when we talk about things that they have going on and expectations for the roles or goals that are coming up or deadlines. And so we ask that the chapters keep to this. And there's plenty of things, as I mentioned, later on in the presentation, but that you both heard already, was that stakeholders document that gives them this 28 things or more that they have control over and that they can change and make decisions on. And this is one of that small list of things that IHQ and IEC do sort of mandate that, so that we're having the good expectations across the board as far as what the conversations are and who's doing what roles. And then down here at the bottom, we've also again got the judicial board, which probably looks pretty similar to when you guys were undergraduates, but it's headed by the Archon. And so there's 3 standing members from the e-board, and then there's 2 additional reps that are elected from the general members.
We didn't have a judicial board. What does the judicial board do?
So the judicial board is usually only going to be used in the circumstances where there's some sort of a risk or holding brothers accountable. If there's poor behavior or there's something along those that needs to be addressed. Often they're going to manage small things like, oh, well, you haven't paid dues, so we're going to put you on social probation. And those are things that are going to fall to the J board to manage and make sure that they're holding brothers accountable for various expectations that the general brotherhood should be abided by.
Maybe not having it was our problem, Dave.
What's that?
Maybe not having it was one of our problems.
Yeah. I'm surprised the Rex wouldn't be a standing member of that. Usually the Rex ends up being one of the more responsible people. And
this is true. So I didn't mean to cut you off there, David.
No, I was going to say that, and the pool often gets pretty shallow after that.
It certainly can. Typically, the VP of Education, the Archon, usually is also maybe not as strong as the Rex sometimes, but usually does a fairly good job, given that the role is shifted a little bit because now they're also responsible for new member education. So there's a little bit more responsibility with that role. And we found that it works okay. Ultimately, we have an odd number that's included here. Ultimately, there are some decisions that can come down from the Rex that he has the ability to be able to, suspend a member, in the moment in the event that there's something significantly risky that goes on, assaults or drunken disorderly behavior, something along those lines that that they need to step in for. So they do have some powers in that, but pulling that away from the Rex to hopefully keep him from being burnt out and asking a lot of his time. It helps to have that the ability to be able to hand it off to those other 3 standing members. But good question though. Anything else on those roles? Any questions you guys had?
No.
Hey, Chris, this is where I kind of came in, so I'm going to tap off. I have a couple things to do. So
sure.
Thanks for your time. Take care.
Yep. Take care, Lump.
With the coach versus advisor, a lot of times people go, oh, well, what happened to the chapter advisor? It's really one and the same. It's not meant to be a separate role as much as it's a rebrand of the advisor. Advisor really kind of implies more of like making decisions, being part of the decisions, where the goal that we have for our alumni volunteers is really to be a coach in the sense of like, hey, we're going to put together a game plan, and then it's your role to execute that game plan. And we're going to work together on talking about what things should be part of that game plan, but you're the one that has to actually go out and execute it, actually in the game. And it comes from recruitment or dues and all those things. it's a slight change in the wording, but we think that it has a big impact on what the expectation is for the role versus what we previously called an advisor, but one and the same. In case that might have been a question that you might have been having. We hope that the interactions are mutually beneficial. There is a lot of, I love being able to give back to our brothers and be able to help, mentor them, kind of help them work through challenges that they're facing. And I think that's something that I get out of the interactions that I have, coaching these guys. But there's also got to be, a what's in it for me from the undergraduate standpoint too, of like, well, what is this? Why am I spending extra time going through another meeting, especially when it's like the Rex who's got to do things with the campus, and they got to meet with IHQ, and then they've got to have another meeting with a coach and do all of these things. And it is an opportunity to, build a personal relationship with these guys so that there's, that mutual benefit and that you're both building a relationship, checking in, that making sure that there's the mental well-being for these guys of, hey, maybe their significant other just broke up with them, or a loved one just passed away, and maybe they don't have the ability to be able to focus their mind on the business side of the fraternity, and helping to know that it's okay for them to have those challenges, that we can work through those things. And if we're going to pause the fraternity stuff and work on you personally, we can do that too. So I think that's a great benefit for both sides. And then additionally, I've got some great coaches. Ron Jenkins from Temple comes to mind, that has done a great job with this, that he does a lot of professional development with the undergraduates. So he goes through their LinkedIn profiles, he goes through the resumes, he does mock interviews. He's really helped these guys to be, maturing and, leaving PALM better for having been part of the organization.
Cool.
And then that institutional knowledge is such a big part of it too, of knowing that there's no organization in the world that's going to constantly change out their higher ups, because they're going to lose all the knowledge of how do we do this? How do we, who's the guy that pushes that button that nobody knows about, right? Like, there's not having that on that institutional knowledge continuing on from e-board to e-board, and not playing telephone like we mentioned before, plays a big part in that. I think that's kind of about the time that you came in, I think, right? When we were talking a little about
pretty
this.
much it.
Okay.
So,
so
what are the next steps from my perspective?
So next steps are going to be, I'll provide you with the details of, some of the different links that I shared tonight, the slide deck, the recording, in case you wanted to go through that, or share with any other alumni who you think would be a good fit for being the coaches. And as Ian said, trying to help us recruit a couple more guys.
Yeah.
So
let me throw out a couple names.
Yep.
I saw Harry Stamataris was on the invite.
Okay.
Did Harry, what happened? Did he have a conflict, or he's just not interested? Because I would think he would be. He was a Rex, always a great guy, always happy to give back.
I don't know. I apologize. Ian was the one that was managing the back and forth with everybody, so I don't know if something might have come up. But I know that he had mentioned that there was a few guys that had mentioned last minute that something came up, and then he thinks there might have been one or two that might have just straight up forgot. So we'll work through it and make sure that we follow up with Harry. But you think he'd be a good fit?
I do. Another one is Mark D'Agostino. Or D'Agostini, rather.
I think you recommended him when we were at Lehigh.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
He lives in the Bethlehem area.
Okay.
He's he was also a Rex. And so, somebody should reach out to him on it.
Okay.
I think he'd be a good one. And then some of the we'll try to shake the tree and get you some more.
Okay. And I'm happy to run through these again with anybody else that might have some interest, and
Yeah.
even on a, you know, if they don't even, if they're unsure, they go, well, I'd like to learn more. There's no obligation. They can come in, they can meet me, we can talk about it, and if they say, not for me, cool, that's all right. I'm happy to have that conversation. I'm also happy to kind of press them a little bit more if we need to get them to agree. But happy to do these. This is the second one. We've not really done this sort of introduction to it. I think we've already started to find some success with this. So I don't know that I've got a regular cadence to this just yet, but I've got can certainly put on another one of these, pretty quickly,
Yeah.
go through the same slide deck and stuff. So happy to
Well,
go through any of
yeah.
those.
I can tell you the feedback from the weekend up at Lehigh seemed to be uniformly positive. There were a lot of people who just really enjoyed it, appreciated it, and there were many more who didn't make it, but heard about it and were excited about it. And so, I do believe more. Nick DiVinenzia is another one I would reach out to. Nick was up there, and was so.
Okay. Yeah, I'll pass. I'll make sure to pass those names along to Ian. Make sure that he's reaching out. I think when we were talking about potential alumni that either like I had talked with or anybody else had talked with, I'm pretty sure I passed along Mark's name. I'll double check with Ian and see if he reached out and what the word was there. But yeah, I'll make sure to add those names to his list if he's not already in touch, and find out what's going on with Harry.
If other people's experience is similar to mine, I can tell you, sending an email to my personal email is the least likely way to get my attention, because I don't actively monitor my emails. Phone call or a text message, or to my business email gets my attention, but I don't like, like I don't typically give out my business email for non-business things. I'm happy to for this stuff, but if you ever want to get a hold of me, just text me or call me, say, hey, can you do this? And I'll tell you yes or no. I happened to be checking my email for something else, and I saw Ian's email on it, and I'm like, yeah, well, I'm down here for a partnership meeting. We had meetings and a dinner, and I just, dinner came late, but I excused myself and came up to it. But anyway, happy to do it. I'm sure others would be as well. So good. So I was very impressed by the guys that I met there, at the house. I think you guys recruited a great class. It is a really good group, and yet at the same time, I recognize I have the same concerns you do. Like, they are all freshmen. It's going to quickly become Lord of the Flies.
Right.
Yeah,
we want to be those bumpers. We don't want to control what they do, but we want to let's stay here and let's like so many gutter balls.
There's got to be a pig's head on a spike somewhere, but hopefully not. So
hopefully we can get that conch shell in a coach's hand early enough to get a hold of it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys doing this. Good stuff.
My pleasure, David. Have a great evening.
You too, Chris. Bye.
Bye-bye.